Hey everybody, Tony D and Little Joan here on a hot take. Um, this is a comic book hot take. I know. A lot of you write in my comments. Oh man, you're doing comics again. Aren't comics over? Yeah, kinda. But I make comics, so bear with me. This new Warriors thing just won't die. It's just a train wreck that just keeps on giving to the YouTubers. So more uh, pieces of data came in about it. Number one, you got to check out nerdrotic.com. They had a cool post about this. He's a YouTuber and he does stuff about geek stuff and comics especially. So his most recent one, he was showing clips of various Zoom meetings between people like Steve Geppi, who owns Diamond Comic Distributors, and Chuck Rosansky, the owner of Mile High Comics and a lot of big name retailers in the country. And some of what was discussed was the business end of comics. And the only one who seems to really have a clue is Chuck, of course, who's, he became a millionaire. He's the king of comics, that guy. I met his daughter, Ro, who used to be on the convention circuit and was in my circle of friends, con friends for a while. Hi, Ro. Anyhow, he was saying, this is what you get when you depend on Diamond Comics for your product. You don't become a retailer, you become a Fuller brush salesman. Now, Fuller brushes was like, they were a line of brushes, and then salesmen would go door to door like in ancient times. Chuck's kind of old, so it'd be like selling out of a Sears catalog, or I don't know how I could describe catalogs to you youngins out there. Okay, so imagine Amazon.com before the internet was a big book of stuff, and you would just order out of the book, and you would have to like mail in a check, and then the Amazon stuff would come to you. That's what a mail order catalog thing is. And there used to be a lot of them, and you would order stuff through them, but you could do it at home. Say, so by doing it in a comic book shop, it's weird, right? You should be able to just order directly, rather and cut out the middleman. You don't need a store if you already have the catalog. But and Chuck is right. You should be, not just ordering from previews. And I imagine he would have supported the notion not to have exclusive deals for these publishers. See, the publishers screwed the pooch on the whole industry when they signed these exclusive deals with Diamond Comics. And the exclusive deal was they would only go through Diamond distributors to distribute their product, and in return, Diamond would give them preferential treatment within the catalog. So the catalog used to be in alphabetical order by publisher, which is why publishers would call themselves AAA Comics and Aardvark and Anheim and stuff like that. So people got wise to that. A1 Comics, all kinds of crazy A names just to get to the front of the catalog. So Diamond came up with this idea. Well, we'll do an exclusive deal, and in return, we'll put you to the front of the catalog. If you have an exclusive deal with us, you'll be front and center, and you'll get like a page for every one of your comics and stuff like that. So that's what the big publishers did. They signed on to that, so every one of their comics would be very prominently displayed, and they would be at the beginning of the catalog. And what that did was that pushed all the independent publishers to the back of the catalog, where a lot of lazier comic book stores, once you get your Marvel and DC, like maybe you flip through Image and then you call it a day. Like, I'm not going back and flipping through all this independent weird stuff. I don't understand it. And that helped them maybe marginally, I guess, for the guys who are too lazy to flip through a catalog. But you got to think the guys who are too lazy to flip through a catalog probably be too lazy to make a successful business. Because really you need something more in your store other than Marvel and DC if you're really a long-term sort of survival guy of the comic book retailing biz. Anyhow, not to get too insider baseball, but I just did. They were talking about how the industry is just going downhill. And the real problem with the industry, the real problem, and I've talked about this before, but just in a nutshell, the comics just suck. Most comic books coming out suck. Yeah, there's a handful of good ones here and there, but for most of the comics, the majority of them that are American made, and they're mostly superhero comics coming out of Marvel and DC, they're terrible. They're just awful. And the ones that are better are still too expensive and have all the other problems. And they're not even that good. They frequently, even when they get a good comic, they wear out their welcome long before they're actually canceled. So you look at a character like Harley Quinn, which suddenly became a hot item. Harley Quinn is already worn out her welcome creatively, because she wasn't designed to be a character to just endure and be in the real lineup of the heroes and villains in the Marvel and DC universe. Now, sometimes that lineup changes, and because of Harley's popularity, it would change slightly in the old days. But much like what happened to Venom, they've beaten a dead horse, right? So Venom back in the day was this popular anti-Spider-Man character that I believe it was Todd McFarlane created him, or recreated him out of stuff that had already happened in the Spider-Man comic, I should say. I guess he created Eddie Brock, probably, right? Because he was doing Spider-Man at that time. And Todd actually had a great ending for the Venom character. And it's an ending where Eddie Brock fights Spider-Man on a desert island, and Spider-Man tricks him into thinking that he's actually killed him. And Eddie Brock and Venom decide to live happily on the island forever and ever. That, to me, was a good send-off for the character, right? Like, Spider-Man couldn't beat him, but he could convince him that he had won. And then Eddie's happy, Spider-Man's happy, he doesn't have to deal with Eddie anymore, and Venom's happy, apparently. So, but the character was too popular just to leave on that island. And so they started bringing him back. And then he became so popular, it was like, well, now we got to try to make him into a hero. So we'll rebrand him as Venom, the Lethal Protector, which makes no sense because he was a bad guy. Bad guys turning into good guys is possible, but the problem with it in the world of comics is typically you got a weak writer on a comic at some point, and they do what weak writers do. They kill a bunch of people just to get, sales. Look at all the sales. I killed all these people, and now the Riddler's a murderer. Like, he never killed anybody before, but now he has. And wow, aren't I clever? Not really. All you've done is up the stakes, and then you've left us with a character that kind of has nowhere to go. Whereas if you just kept hinting at it, you could always kind of, come up with clever ways to say he might cross that line. But then he never does. He never does for whatever reason. Maybe he comes close, but he never does. Maybe he even tries to cross the line and fails. So, anyhow, I think the comic books, especially the comic book superheroes in America, are just terrible. They're so terrible. The last time I bought some, I forgot and never read them. And I'm a guy who's steeped in comics, so that says something in my view. And it's not about me being too old, because most of the comic fans are older than you think, and don't look like Willie Nelson. So when you've got Chuck Rosansky, the guy who basically is the king of comic book retailers, telling you that putting all your eggs in the diamond basket is bad, and and all these things that are happening are bad. I mean, you got to listen to him. But the problem is, I think a lot of the retailers are kidding themselves, and to some extent, Geppy too. These companies aren't going to change, and you can't make them change. No amount of pressure from the comic book stores is going to impact them. It never has. And this was back in the 80s and 90s when, comic book retailers would get wined and dined down in Maryland at the warehouse in these big parties where they would get exclusives and go to a trade show that nobody else was supposed to go to. They still didn't really have any influence. They were just, I think, for the publishers, cash cows. And they were wined and dined because, yeah, we want you to continue to represent our product. And when you went to these trade show panels, and even the regular panels you might see at a comic book show, they were all the same. Like, buy our comic, there's going to be something crazy and new. And then there wasn't. You know, it would be the same old stuff. Oh, we're having a big crossover this year, and so-and-so's going to change costumes, and so-and-so's going to die, maybe, and somebody's going to have a baby, and it was nothing. It was all sound and fury signifying nothing. There were no real creative choices anymore. And I think that goes back to the fact that for the majority of the creators at Marvel and DC, they're dead or retired or whatever. And now at Image had an opportunity. When Diamond Comics was basically cornering the market on distribution and driving everybody out, they had an opportunity to go, no, we won't sign exclusively. We'll stay non-exclusive with Diamond, and we'll continue to support the other distributors. They could have supported Cap City and Cap City would have become the catalog of Image Comics and independent comics. And Image could have led that. And that would have been, the optics on that would have been great. From a comic book standpoint, that would have been great. And Cap City might have survived this long. They might be around right now to say, hey, we'll pick up the torch. Oh, Geppy didn't pay you? Well, if you want to get out of your exclusive deal. And then DC would be going to Cap City right now, and they would have the infrastructure, hopefully to, and Marvel too. Marvel too might say, yeah, well, we'll go to Cap City then. You're screwing the pooch. We're going to go back to Cap City. And that would be the end of Diamond, probably. It might mean only that Cap City then survives and then nobody else does. But, you need competition in a marketplace. And when Diamond killed the competition, it also killed itself because it put all the pressure on itself. You don't want to be the only supplier in town, even for yourself. It's fine to be the best, but if you're the only guy, well, then you got to deal with customers you don't even want to deal with. Some customers, it's better for them to deal with a smaller outfit if you're a big outfit, and vice versa. So, the comic book industry has only itself to blame. When I was doing the comic book show back in the early 90s and telling these guys, you're headed for all this collectability, but you're not really doing anything with it. You're just making chromium covers and all this other BS, and it's worthless. It's all worthless. It's people buying 10,000 copies just to hope the price goes up to sell them online or whatever, and that's what they did. That was bad for the industry. But try to tell that to a retailer selling these guys. You couldn't. You just couldn't. Everybody was making money, so they didn't care. They didn't care people were buying comics they never even read. Comics that they just put in a bag and then put in your basement, sock away for years and years until they got divorced and then tried to sell them for money. They're worthless. A lot of those comics from that, actually most of the comics from that era are pretty worthless. Spawn #1, anyone? Yeah, it's kind of a worthless comic. It's kind of the worthless comic because, it's about supply and demand, and they printed millions and millions of copies of Spawn #1. I'm not knocking the comic. I always thought Spawn was okay. I mean, it was very derivative, but, I think Todd's enthusiasm really helped the comic. And, it's kind of Batman meets Spider-Man when you get right down to it, meets, I don't know, Ghost Rider. And, you know, he had some ideas in there that weren't awful. I think his execution from a writer's standpoint was kind of schizophrenic and all over the place. And ultimately, he kind of messed it up because he kind of stopped taking the ideas from writers. And I don't know. I can't really say what really messed up Spawn, but, you know, the point is, what messed up Image Comics was to go along with this exclusive deal. It was dumb. It was a dumb move. And most of the guys at Image who ran Image at that time, I didn't think they even needed the money. I don't think they. I think they still don't need the money from comic sales. No, they would have been fine. I think their fans would have been happy to flip to the back of the catalog to find the Image section, and in fact, they would have looked like heroes. They would have looked like the heroes of independent comics. And that's what we really needed, because that diversity of thought would have kept the industry vibrant and alive instead of pushing it aside and making it harder. Now, from their point of view, they were making it better for independent creators, since they consider themselves independent creators, and they are. But I think it would have been better to support everybody with a broader brush, and you wouldn't be in this terrible, terrible situation that you're in the comic book industry. Now, I have to talk about the New Warriors, but I'm out of time, so I'm going to talk about it in another video. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Please check out my books, Wokistan, a Novel, and The Pineys, books 1, 2, 3, and 4, at Amazon.com. Ebook, trade paperback, Kindle Unlimited is free. And you could help feed me and Little Joan. See you next time.